He harassed the wrong girl. His biggest mistake. The morning sun had barely risen over the quiet town of Willow Creek. Small shops were opening one by one. Children were walking to school, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through the streets. Among the people beginning another ordinary day was 24-year-old Riya Parker. To everyone who knew her, Riya was kind, hardworking, and always ready to help others. After losing her father 3 years earlier, she had become the main support for her family. She worked as a freelance graphic designer from home while taking care of her mother, whose health had slowly been getting worse. Life wasn't easy. Every dollar mattered. Every decision had consequences. Yet Riya never complained. She believed that no matter how difficult life became, honesty and hard work would eventually pay off. Every Saturday morning, she followed the same routine. She made a shopping list, grabbed her reusable grocery bags, and walked 10 minutes to the largest grocery store in town. The store was called Greenmart Grocery. It had been in the neighborhood for over 15 years and was known for its fresh vegetables, reasonable prices, and friendly service. Or at least, that's what people believed. The owner of Greenmart was a man named David Collins. In public, David looked like the perfect businessman. He smiled at customers. He donated food during holidays. He sponsored local community events. People often praised him. David is such a generous man. He's one of the nicest business owners in town. I wish more people were like him. But appearances can hide ugly truths. There was another side to David, a side that very few people had seen. And those who had, rarely spoke about it. Riya entered Greenmart just after 10 a.m. The automatic doors slid open. A cool breeze from the air conditioner welcomed her as soft music played through the speakers. She picked up a shopping basket and quietly began checking items off her list. Milk, bread, eggs, rice, coffee. Everything felt normal. Nothing seemed unusual. As she reached for a box of cereal, she noticed someone watching her. She looked across the aisle. David, standing near the end of the shelf, smiling. Not a friendly smile. Something about it made her uncomfortable. She looked away and continued shopping. Maybe I'm just imagining things, she thought. A few minutes later, she walked toward the fruit section. As she bent down to pick up a bag of apples, she suddenly heard a voice behind her. Good morning, Riya. She turned around. David was standing much closer than she expected. Oh, good morning. I've seen you shopping here every week. She forced a polite smile. Yes. You always shop alone. The question felt strange. She answered carefully. Usually. David chuckled. You should smile more. A beautiful young woman shouldn't always look so serious. Riya's smile disappeared. Excuse me. I still have shopping to finish. She pushed her cart forward without another word. Behind her, David continued watching. For the next 15 minutes, something odd kept happening. Every aisle she entered, David somehow appeared there. At first she assumed it was coincidence. Then she noticed something. He wasn't carrying any products. He wasn't helping employees. He was simply following her through the store. Her heartbeat became a little faster. She told herself not to overreact. After all, he was the owner. Maybe he was just checking the store. Still, the feeling in her stomach refused to disappear. Finally, Riya reached the checkout counter. She placed her groceries on the conveyor belt. The young cashier smiled politely. Good morning. Before the cashier could finish scanning the items, David walked over. I'll handle this customer. The cashier looked surprised. Oh, okay, sir. He stepped away. David began scanning the groceries himself. Slowly, very slowly. So, do you live nearby? Riya gave a short answer. Yes. I don't think I've seen your husband. I'm not married. David raised his eyebrows. Really? That's surprising. She ignored the comment. He continued, a beautiful woman like you shouldn't stay single. Riya picked up her wallet. I'd like to pay, please. David leaned slightly closer across the counter. You know, if you ever need anything, you can come directly to me. His tone wasn't professional. It wasn't friendly. It made her deeply uncomfortable. She quickly paid for the groceries. Have a nice day. Without waiting for his response, she walked out of the store. Outside, she stopped walking. The fresh air felt different. She took a deep breath. Maybe I'm overthinking. It was awkward, but maybe that's all. She didn't want to accuse anyone unfairly. She didn't tell her mother what had happened. She didn't tell her friends. She simply hoped it would never happen again. Unfortunately, she had no idea that this was only the beginning. The next visit to Green Mart would change her life forever. 3 days passed. Riya tried to convince herself that the uncomfortable encounter at Green Mart had simply been an awkward misunderstanding. She buried herself in work, taking on extra design projects to help pay for her mother's medication. By Saturday morning, her kitchen shelves were nearly empty again. She looked at her shopping list and sighed. I guess I have to go back. Part of her wanted to visit another grocery store across town, but it was nearly 40 minutes away and much more expensive. Green Mart was still the most practical option. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her shopping bags and headed out. The familiar automatic doors slid open. The store looked just as it always had. Customers pushed shopping carts through the aisles. Children begged their parents for candy. Employees stocked shelves with fresh products. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Riya quietly began collecting the items on her list. She avoided looking toward the front office. She hoped David wouldn't notice her. For nearly 20 minutes, it worked. Then she heard his voice. Welcome back, Riya. She froze. Turning slowly, she saw David standing beside an end display with the same confident smile. Good morning, she replied politely. I was wondering when you'd come back. I've been busy. I noticed. His answer surprised her. Noticed? You usually shop every Saturday morning around 10. A chill ran through her body. How closely had he been paying attention? Trying to stay calm, she simply nodded and continued walking. As she moved into another aisle, she realized he had followed her again. This time, there was no doubt. Whenever she stopped, he stopped. Whenever she turned, he appeared nearby. His behavior no longer felt accidental. It felt intentional. She decided to finish as quickly as possible. Near the dairy section, an elderly woman accidentally dropped a carton of milk. Without hesitation, Riya bent down to help. The woman smiled warmly. Thank you, dear. It was nothing. David watched the entire exchange from several feet away. The old woman quietly whispered before leaving. Be careful around some people who smile too much. Riya looked up. Before she could ask what she meant, the woman had already disappeared into another aisle. Those words stayed in her mind. At the checkout, Riya deliberately chose the busiest cashier lane. She hoped the crowd would keep everything professional. For a few minutes it did. Then David walked over again. He didn't take over the register this time. Instead, he stood beside it, making casual conversation while the cashier scanned the groceries. The cashier looked uncomfortable but remained silent. When Riya collected her receipt, David handed her a small business card. If you ever have any special requests, call me directly. She glanced at the card. His personal phone number was handwritten on the back. I don't need it, she said calmly, placing the card on the counter. For the first time, David's smile faded. Suit yourself. She picked up her bags and walked away without looking back. Outside the store, Riya immediately threw the business card into a nearby trash bin. Something wasn't right. This wasn't friendliness. This wasn't customer service. It was a pattern. When she reached home, she couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Later that evening, she received a phone call from her best friend, Nisha. You sound different, Nisha said. Is everything okay? For a moment, Riya stayed silent. Then, for the first time, she told someone everything. She described David's repeated behavior, the unnecessary conversations, and how uncomfortable she felt every time she visited the store. Nisha listened without interrupting. When Riya finished, Nisha spoke firmly. If your instincts are telling you something is wrong, don't ignore them. What should I do? Don't confront him alone. And don't let him think you're afraid. But most importantly, if this behavior continues, start keeping a record of everything. Riya looked down at her notebook. A record? Dates? Times? What happened? Every single detail. You may never need it, but if you do, it could make all the difference. For the first time since all of this had begun, Riya felt a little stronger. She wasn't looking for revenge. She wasn't looking for trouble. She simply wanted the truth to come to light. Little did she know, within days, she would discover that she wasn't the only woman who had felt uncomfortable around David, and that discovery would change everything. Fear turns into determination. Monday morning arrived with gray clouds, hanging over Willow Creek. Riya sat in front of her laptop, trying to concentrate on a logo design for one of her clients. Normally, designing was her escape. Today, she couldn't focus. Every few minutes, her mind drifted back to Greenmart. David's words, his smile, the feeling that someone had been watching her. She closed her laptop and walked to the kitchen. Her mother noticed the worry on her face. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Riya forced a smile. "I'm just tired." She didn't want to burden her mother, whose health was already fragile. But keeping everything inside was becoming harder. That afternoon, Nisha came over with coffee. The two friends had known each other since high school. Nisha was the kind of person who always noticed when something was wrong. After a few minutes of casual conversation, she finally asked, "Have you thought about what we discussed?" Riya nodded. "I have. And I'm scared." Nisha didn't dismiss her fear. Instead, she said quietly, "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you understand the risk." Riya looked out the window. "What if nobody believes me? What if people think I'm making it up?" Nisha answered without hesitation. "That's exactly why evidence matters." Later that evening, Riya bought a small notebook. On the first page she wrote, "Greenmart Journal." Below it she listed, "Saturday, 10:12 a.m. Owner approached me near the fruit section. 10:28 a.m. Followed me through multiple aisles. 10:41 a.m. Insisted on handling my checkout." She wrote only facts. No guesses. No emotions. Just details. It wasn't revenge. It was documentation. The following Saturday, Riya returned to Greenmart. This time, she had a different mindset. She wasn't there to confront anyone. She simply wanted to observe. As soon as she entered, she noticed something she had ignored before. Whenever David saw female customers shopping alone, he seemed unusually interested in them. He would start conversations that lasted longer than necessary. He often stood too close. Most customers simply smiled politely and walked away. Some looked uncomfortable. Others pretended not to notice. Riya quietly added mental notes. As she reached the bakery section, she saw a young employee struggling to stack boxes. Without thinking, Riya helped her. "Thank you," the employee whispered. "My name's Emma." "I'm Riya." Emma looked around before speaking again. "You don't have to answer this. But has the owner ever made you uncomfortable?" Riya's heart skipped a beat. She looked directly at Emma. "Why are you asking?" Emma hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. "Because I've seen the way he watches certain customers." Before Riya could ask another question, another employee called Emma away. The conversation ended, but those few words confirmed something important. She wasn't imagining things. Outside the store, Riya couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Was she afraid? Had she seen something? Or had something happened to her too? That evening, Riya received an unexpected message on social media. It was from Emma. The message read, "I didn't want to talk inside the store. Cameras are everywhere. If you really want to know the truth about David, meet me tomorrow afternoon at the cafe on Oak Street." Riya stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened. She immediately called Nisha. "I think someone wants to tell me something." Nisha asked, "Do you trust her?" "I don't know." "Then don't go alone." The next afternoon, Riya and Nisha arrived at the cafe together. Emma was already waiting. She looked nervous. She kept glancing toward the windows. Finally, she spoke. "I've worked at Greenmart for almost 2 years. People think David is the nicest man in town. But that's only because they don't see what happens behind closed doors." Riya listened silently. Emma continued, "He knows exactly how far he can go without attracting attention. He chooses moments when no one is watching. He relies on people staying silent." Riya asked softly, "Have you reported him?" Emma shook her head. "I was afraid. I needed this job. And I thought no one would believe me." There was a long silence. Then Emma looked directly into Riya's eyes. "But when I saw the way he kept following you, I realized I wasn't the only one." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Riya reached across the table. She gently held Emma's hand. "You don't have to face this alone anymore." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Neither of them wanted revenge. They wanted the truth. They wanted the behavior to stop. And they wanted every future customer and employee to feel safe. As they left the cafe, Riya looked at Nisha. "What do we do now?" Nisha replied firmly, "We stay calm. We collect facts. And when the time is right, We let the truth speak for itself. None of them realized that someone sitting across the street had quietly taken a picture of the three women together. And that photo would soon reach David. The next morning, Riya woke up with a strange feeling. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't just afraid. She had a plan. The meeting with Emma had confirmed what she had suspected all along. David's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. If the truth was ever going to come out, it had to be backed by facts, not rumors. Riya opened her notebook and wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page. Facts speak louder than fear. That afternoon, Riya, Nisha, and Emma met again, this time in a quiet room at the local public library. Nisha placed a folder on the table. We're going to stay organized, she said. No assumptions. No exaggerations. Only evidence. Emma nodded. I've saved every work schedule for the last 2 years. She placed several copies on the table. There are dates when David always asked me to stay late after closing. Riya carefully compared the schedules. A pattern slowly began to appear. Whenever young female employees worked evening shifts alone, David often remained in the store after everyone else had left. Emma then took out another envelope. Inside were screenshots of old text messages. Most of them looked harmless at first, but together they showed repeated attempts to contact employees outside work for reasons unrelated to business. Nisha looked up. This isn't proof of a crime by itself, but it does show a pattern of unprofessional behavior. Emma quietly agreed. That's why nobody ever reported him. Each incident seemed too small on its own. Meanwhile, David had begun to notice something. Emma had become quieter. Riya no longer looked nervous when she visited the store. Instead, she looked observant. That bothered him. One afternoon, he called his assistant into the office. Have you noticed anything unusual? The assistant shrugged. No, sir. David leaned back in his chair. I don't like surprises. Outside the office window, Riya was paying for groceries. For the first time, she chose a checkout lane where several customers were already waiting. She kept every interaction brief and professional. She left without giving David the opportunity to isolate her. Later that evening, Riya received an unexpected phone call. It was from another former Green Mart employee. Her name was Olivia. I got your number from Emma. Riya listened quietly. Olivia took a deep breath. I don't want to be part of any drama. But if you're trying to stop David, I'll tell you what I know. The next day, the four women met together. Olivia explained that she had resigned nearly a year earlier because she felt increasingly uncomfortable working alone with David. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, so I quit instead. She lowered her eyes. I still regret staying silent. Riya gently replied, You don't have to carry that alone anymore. As the days passed, the group continued gathering information carefully. Each person wrote down only what they had personally experienced. Each statement was dated and signed. They avoided gossip. They avoided assumptions. They wanted their information to be credible. Nisha smiled. This is exactly how the truth becomes impossible to ignore. One Friday afternoon, Emma noticed something unusual while organizing old paperwork in the manager's office. A folder labeled Security Maintenance had been left on a desk. Inside was a schedule showing how long surveillance footage was normally stored before being overwritten. Emma memorized the dates, but didn't remove or photograph any documents. She simply shared the information with Riya later. If anything important happens, Emma said, we'll know there's only a limited time for the footage to be preserved. Riya immediately understood. If they ever needed official evidence, they would have to act quickly and through the proper authorities. That evening, Nisha contacted a local legal aid organization for advice. The attorney they spoke with listened carefully. After reviewing the notes, the lawyer said, You've done the right thing by documenting everything. If this behavior continues, don't try to handle it yourselves. Report it promptly. And if there are relevant security recordings, request that they be preserved through the proper legal process. For the first time, Riya felt that they were no longer facing the situation alone. They had support. They had guidance. Most importantly, they had each other. Across town, David stood alone inside his office after closing time. He looked out through the glass window toward the nearly empty parking lot. Something felt different. The confidence he had carried for years was beginning to crack. He couldn't explain why. He simply had the feeling that someone was quietly putting the pieces together. And for the first time in a very long time, He wasn't completely in control. The following week, life in Willow Creek seemed completely normal. Cars filled the streets. Children laughed on their way home from school. Customers continued walking into Green Mart, believing it was just another friendly neighborhood grocery store. But beneath the surface, something had begun to change. A quiet truth was slowly finding its voice. Riya sat at the same cafe where she had first met Emma. This time, there were 4 empty chairs around the table. She wasn't sure if anyone else would come. At exactly 2 o'clock, the cafe door opened. A young woman walked inside. She looked nervous. Her hands trembled as she looked around the room. Emma stood up and smiled warmly. "It's okay. You can sit with us." The woman introduced herself. "My name is Sophie." She had worked at Green Mart for only 6 months before leaving without telling anyone why. For a long moment, she stared down at her coffee. Finally, she spoke. "I thought if I stayed quiet, I could just move on. But every time I heard someone say David was a wonderful man, I felt guilty." Riya listened without interrupting. "You don't have to tell us anything you're not comfortable sharing," she said gently. Sophie nodded. "I just want the truth to be known." Over the next hour, Sophie described repeated moments when David had crossed professional boundaries through unwanted personal attention and attempts to isolate her at work. She explained that she had reported feeling uncomfortable to a supervisor, but nothing changed. Feeling unsupported, she eventually resigned. There were no dramatic accusations, only quiet, consistent experiences that matched the pattern Riya and Emma had already noticed. When Sophie finished speaking, no one said a word. The silence itself spoke volumes. A few days later, another former employee contacted Emma. Then another. Each person's story was different, yet they all shared one thing in common. The same uneasy feeling. The same hesitation to speak. The same fear that no one would believe them. Riya realized something important. Fear had protected David for years, not because he was powerful, but because every victim believed they were alone. Now, they weren't. Nisha organized everyone's written statements into separate folders. Each statement included only first-hand experiences, no assumptions, no exaggeration, no rumors. "If this ever reaches the authorities," she explained, "it has to be credible. Facts are stronger than emotions." Everyone agreed. Meanwhile, David began noticing small changes inside the store. Employees stopped laughing around him. Conversations suddenly ended whenever he entered the room. Some workers quietly requested schedule changes. Others avoided being alone with him. He couldn't understand why. One afternoon, he called the store manager into his office. "Is someone spreading rumors about me?" The manager hesitated. "I haven't heard anything specific." David stared at him for several seconds. "If you do, I expect to know immediately." The manager simply nodded and left. Outside the office, he took a deep breath. Even he had begun to question the man he worked for. That Saturday, Riya visited Green Mart once again. She wasn't there to provoke anyone. She shopped as she normally would. Milk, rice, fresh vegetables, coffee. As she reached the checkout area, she noticed something unexpected. David looked distracted. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. Their eyes met briefly. Instead of speaking, Riya calmly paid for her groceries and walked toward the exit. Behind her, David watched in silence. He had the unsettling feeling that something was slipping beyond his control. Later that evening, Riya received a call from the legal aid attorney. "I've reviewed the material you've collected. It's organized and thoughtful. But before any formal action is taken, it's important that anyone who wishes to report comes forward voluntarily." Riya thanked the attorney. She understood. This wasn't about forcing anyone. It was about giving people the confidence to speak when they were ready. The next afternoon, the group met once again. This time, there were 7 women sitting around the table. Some had worked at Green Mart. Some had been regular customers. All of them had one thing in common. They wanted the behavior to stop. No one talked about revenge. No one talked about humiliation. They talked about safety, respect, and accountability. Riya looked around the table and quietly said, "For a long time, each of us believed we were alone." She smiled. "We were wrong." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, every woman sitting there felt something stronger than fear. They felt hope. None of them realized that, at that very moment, David had hired a private investigator to find out why so many former employees had suddenly reconnected. And before the week was over, he would learn Riya's name for reasons he never expected. Monday morning arrived with an unusual sense of determination. Riya stood by her bedroom window, watching the rain fall over Willow Creek. Just a few weeks earlier, she had felt powerless. Now, she wasn't alone anymore. Emma, Sophie, Olivia, Nisha, and several other women stood beside her. Together, they had one goal. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Justice. That afternoon, the group met once again in the conference room of the local legal aid center. Waiting for them was attorney Sarah Mitchell, a lawyer with years of experience handling workplace misconduct cases. She welcomed everyone with a reassuring smile. "Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy." She looked around the room before continuing. "The most important thing you can do is remain calm, truthful, and patient. Justice isn't built on anger. It's built on facts." Everyone nodded. Sarah opened a large folder on the table. Inside were neatly organized statements from each woman. She reviewed them one by one. The stories are independent. They were written separately. And yet, they described similar patterns. She looked up. "That's important." She explained that each person should preserve any relevant records, messages, work schedules, receipts, or notes, and avoid discussing details publicly while the matter was being reviewed. "We're not trying to win an argument," Sarah said. "We're trying to establish the truth." Meanwhile, Greenmark continued operating as if nothing had changed. Customers filled the aisles. Cashiers greeted shoppers with friendly smiles. David acted exactly as he always had. But beneath his calm expression, he was growing uneasy. He had noticed the unusual meetings between former employees. He couldn't explain why, yet he felt as though an invisible storm was approaching. Later that week, Emma quietly informed Riya that several employees were willing to speak with investigators if asked officially. "They've been afraid for a long time," Emma said, "but they're tired of staying silent." Riya smiled. "Courage spreads." Emma nodded. "So does truth." The following day, Riya received a phone call from Sarah. "I've spoken with the appropriate authorities," Sarah explained. "They're prepared to review the information. If anyone makes a formal report, they'll know what evidence exists and can request any relevant records through the proper legal process." Riya felt relief. Everything would be handled lawfully. No secret traps. No risky confrontations. No one would take matters into their own hands. A few days later, David invited several employees to a staff meeting. He stood confidently at the front of the room. "I've heard rumors that someone is trying to damage this business." The room remained silent. "If any of you have concerns, you should bring them directly to me." No one spoke. Not because they were afraid, because they had already chosen a different path. One based on formal reporting rather than private confrontation. David interpreted the silence as loyalty. In reality, it meant his influence was fading. That evening, Riya and Nisha walked through the town park. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to smile. Nisha looked at her friend. "Do you ever wish none of this had happened?" Riya answered honestly. "Every day." She paused. "But if staying silent meant someone else would go through the same thing, I couldn't live with that." Nisha placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And now you don't have to face it alone." Across town, David sat alone in his office after closing time. The store was quiet. He stared at the security monitors, showing empty aisles. Something felt different. Customers still came. Employees still worked. But the confidence he once had was disappearing. He picked up a framed photograph from his desk, an award recognizing him as Businessman of the Year. For years, he believed his reputation made him untouchable. Now, he wasn't so sure. As he looked out at the dark parking lot, a police vehicle slowly drove past the front of the store. It didn't stop. It simply continued down the street. Yet the sight of it made David's heart race. For the first time in years, he wondered if the truth was finally catching up with him. A cold Monday morning settled over Willow Creek. The streets were quiet. Greenmart opened its doors at exactly 8 o'clock, just as it had every day for the past 15 years. Customers walked in with shopping lists. Employees greeted them with polite smiles. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. But inside, the atmosphere had changed. Everyone could feel it. At 9:30, Two investigators arrived at Green Mart. They introduced themselves to the store manager and explained that they were following up on formal complaints that had recently been submitted. The visit was calm and professional. No one was arrested. No accusations were made in front of customers. The investigators simply requested records, interviewed willing employees, and explained the next steps. David watched from his office window. His confident smile faded. He had expected rumors. He had not expected official scrutiny. Later that afternoon, Riya received a phone call from attorney Sarah Mitchell. "They've begun the process," Sarah said. "It may take time, but that's normal." Riya thanked her. For weeks, she had carried fear like a heavy weight. Now, that weight was slowly being replaced by hope. Over the next several days, investigators met privately with current and former employees. Each person spoke only about what they had personally experienced or witnessed. Some interviews lasted 10 minutes. Others lasted over an hour. No one exaggerated. No one tried to make the story more dramatic. The facts were enough. As more statements were compared, investigators noticed recurring patterns that warranted closer examination. Meanwhile, David tried to reassure his staff. During a morning meeting, he said, "People say all kinds of things. I'm sure this misunderstanding will disappear." Some employees quietly looked at one another. No one responded. For the first time in years, his words carried little influence. Emma continued working professionally while cooperating with the investigation. One afternoon, a new cashier quietly approached her during a break. "I've been nervous ever since I started here." Emma smiled gently. "If something makes you uncomfortable, you deserve to be heard." The cashier nodded. "Thank you." Those simple words reminded Emma why they had chosen to speak up. It wasn't only about the past. It was about protecting the future. Days later, investigators requested additional business records through the proper legal channels. Store schedules, staff assignments, and other relevant documents were reviewed alongside witness statements. The process was slow, careful, methodical, exactly as it should be. Riya understood that real justice rarely happened overnight. It required patience. One evening, David sat alone in his office after closing time. The store lights reflected against the rain-soaked parking lot. He opened a drawer containing newspaper clippings, praising his years of community service. For so long, his reputation had shielded him from questions. Now, he realized that reputation alone could not answer evidence. His phone rang. It was his attorney. "We need to prepare for the investigation," the attorney said. "Cooperate fully and avoid discussing the matter publicly." David quietly replied, "I understand." For the first time, he sounded uncertain. Across town, Riya stood outside her home watching the sunset. Her mother joined her. "I don't know everything that's been happening," her mother said softly. "But I know you've been carrying something heavy." Riya smiled. "I just want people to be safe." Her mother gently squeezed her hand. "I'm proud that you chose courage over silence." Those words stayed with Riya long after the conversation ended. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't trying to destroy someone's life. She simply believed that respect, honesty, and accountability mattered. And sometimes, one person's courage could inspire an entire community to speak. As the chapter came to a close, the investigators prepared their preliminary findings. The next step would determine whether the case moved forward. For everyone involved, the moment of truth was getting closer. The following week, the town of Willow Creek felt unusually quiet. People still visited Green Mart. Children still rode their bicycles through the neighborhood. Life appeared normal. But behind closed doors, important decisions were being made. Attorney Sarah Mitchell called Riya early Monday morning. "The investigators have completed the first phase of their review." Riya took a deep breath. "What happens now?" "They've compared witness statements, reviewed the available records, and interviewed everyone who volunteered. There is enough information to move the matter forward through the proper legal and administrative process." For a moment, Riya closed her eyes. She wasn't celebrating. She simply felt relief. Later that afternoon, investigators returned to Green Mart. This time, they met privately with David and his legal representative. The meeting lasted several hours. Customers continued shopping without interruption. Employees quietly carried on with their work. Everything was handled professionally and respectfully. No public spectacle. No shouting. Just a careful examination of the facts. Outside the office, Emma looked at Sophie. Do you think this is finally over? Sophie shook her head. No. I think this is finally the beginning. Over the next few days, several local organizations quietly reached out to current and former employees, offering confidential support and guidance. Many workers who had stayed silent for years finally realized they weren't alone. Some chose to share their experiences. Others simply appreciated knowing help was available if they ever needed it. David remained mostly inside his office. The confident businessman who once greeted every customer now avoided the front of the store. Even simple conversations with employees became brief and formal. He knew his actions were no longer beyond scrutiny. One evening, Riya received another phone call from Sarah. The company that owns Green Mart has completed its internal review. And they've informed David that he has been removed from day-to-day management while the remaining proceedings continue. Riya was silent. This wasn't the dramatic ending people imagined. It was something better. A process based on evidence, not emotion. News of the management change spread quickly through Willow Creek. Neighbors talked quietly. Customers asked questions. Many expressed support for the employees who had come forward. Others simply hoped the store would become a safer workplace. No one celebrated another person's downfall. Instead, the conversation shifted toward respect, professionalism, and accountability. A week later, Green Mart reopened under temporary management. The new manager gathered every employee before opening. She introduced herself. My name is Laura Bennett. My first priority is simple. Every employee and every customer deserves to feel respected and safe. She announced several new workplace policies, additional staff training, and clear procedures for reporting concerns without fear of retaliation. For the first time in years, many employees smiled with genuine relief. That afternoon, Riya returned to Green Mart, not because she had to, because she wanted to. She walked through the same entrance, past the same aisles, reached the same checkout counter. Everything looked familiar, yet everything felt different. Emma greeted her with a warm smile. It's good to see you. Riya smiled back. It's good to see this place changing. She paid for her groceries and walked toward the exit. This time, she didn't feel anxious. She didn't feel afraid. She simply felt free. As she stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight, Nisha was waiting near the parking lot. So, Nisha asked, was it worth it? Riya looked back at the store one last time. I never wanted revenge. I wanted people to be safe. And today, I think we're finally moving in that direction. The two friends walked away together. Behind them, Green Mart welcomed another customer through its automatic doors. The building hadn't changed, but the culture inside it had begun to. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't watching someone fall. It's making sure others no longer have to live in fear. 6 months later, winter had arrived in Willow Creek. Snow lightly covered the sidewalks, and the town looked peaceful once again. For the first time in months, Riya woke up without anxiety. She stretched, opened the curtains, and watched the morning sunlight reflect off the snow. Life was finally beginning to feel normal again. Green Mart had changed completely. Under the new management of Laura Bennett, the store had become one of the most respected businesses in town. Every employee received professional workplace training. A confidential reporting system had been introduced. Clear policies protected both employees and customers. People once again shopped there with confidence. Emma had been promoted to assistant store manager. She smiled more than she had in years. Sophie had started college while working part-time at a local bookstore. Olivia had opened a small bakery with help from her family. One by one, everyone had started rebuilding their lives. As for David, the legal and administrative proceedings had concluded. He was held accountable through the appropriate legal and employment processes. He was no longer involved in running Green Mart. For the first time in his life, he realized that reputation alone could not outweigh the truth. The choices he had made had lasting consequences. One Saturday afternoon, Riya visited Green Mart again. Not because she needed groceries, because she had promised Emma they would have coffee together after her shift. As she walked through the entrance, several employees greeted her warmly. Hi, Riya. Good to see you again. She smiled. Months earlier, she had entered the same building feeling nervous. Today, she walked in with confidence. Emma joined her during her lunch break. They sat near the cafe across the street. I still can't believe everything that's happened, Emma said. Riya laughed softly. Neither can I. Emma stirred her coffee. You know, if you hadn't spoken up, I probably never would have. Riya shook her head. No. We all found our voices together. Emma smiled. And because of that, people who work here now have a safer place. That evening, the town council held its annual community appreciation ceremony. Several local volunteers were recognized for their contributions. To Riya's complete surprise, her name was announced. She slowly walked onto the stage. The mayor handed her a small plaque. This recognition is presented to Riya Parker for her courage, integrity, and commitment to making our community safer through lawful and responsible action. The audience stood and applauded. Riya looked around the room. She saw her mother wiping away tears, Nisha smiling proudly, Emma clapping with both hands. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she stepped to the microphone. I don't accept this award for myself alone. I accept it for every person who has ever been afraid to speak. She paused. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do what's right despite fear. The room fell silent. Then the applause grew even louder. Later that night, Riya walked home beneath a sky full of stars. She remembered the day she had first walked into Green Mart. Back then, she had believed she was completely alone. Now she knew the truth. One honest voice could inspire many others. She smiled to herself, not because she had won, but because something far more important had happened. People had learned that respect, dignity, and accountability matter. And sometimes, one person's courage can change an entire community. As Riya unlocked the front door to her home, her mother hugged her tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Riya smiled. I'm just happy we chose the truth. The snow continued to fall quietly outside. Inside, for the first time in a long time, there was peace. 1 year later, spring had returned to Willow Creek. The trees that had stood bare through winter were covered in fresh green leaves. Flowers bloomed along the sidewalks, and the town felt alive once again. For Riya, life had changed in ways she never imagined. She was no longer remembered as the girl from Green Mart. She had built a successful freelance design business, expanded her client list across the country, and started volunteering with a local nonprofit that helped educate people about respectful workplaces and knowing their rights. She wasn't defined by what had happened to her. She was defined by what she chose to do afterward. One Saturday morning, Riya walked through the town square. The annual Willow Creek Community Fair was in full swing. Local businesses had set up colorful booths. Children laughed as they played games. Families enjoyed music, food, and sunshine. Green Mart had a booth too. This time, it wasn't promoting discounts. Instead, it was sharing information about workplace respect, customer safety, and community trust. Emma, now the store manager, waved from across the booth. Riya, it's so good to see you. Riya smiled. You've done an amazing job. Emma looked around proudly. This place finally feels like what it was always supposed to be. Later that afternoon, Laura Bennett stepped onto the community stage. She addressed the crowd. A strong community isn't one where problems never happen. It's one where people have the courage to face problems honestly. The audience applauded. Many people understood exactly what she meant. As the fair continued, Riya noticed a young woman standing alone near the Green Mart booth. She looked nervous. Riya walked over. Hi, I'm Riya. The young woman smiled shyly. I know who you are. I just wanted to say thank you. Riya looked surprised. The woman continued. I started working here 3 months ago. My first day was scary, but everyone told me this is a place where people respect one another. And they were right. I feel safe here. Those simple words meant more to Riya than any award she had ever received. That evening, Riya, Nisha, Emma, Sophie, and Olivia gathered at their favorite cafe. They laughed about old memories, talked about new dreams, and realized how much their lives had changed. Nisha raised her coffee cup. To new beginnings. Everyone smiled. To new beginnings. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills, Riya walked home alone. She stopped for a moment outside Green Mart. The same building, the same parking lot, the same entrance. Yet everything felt different. Not because the walls had changed, but because the people inside had. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, justice isn't about destroying someone's future. It's about protecting everyone else's. She turned and walked away. She never looked back, because she no longer needed to. Final narration. Sometimes, the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who quietly chooses honesty over fear. Silence can protect wrongdoing, but one truthful voice can inspire many others to stand together. Riya never wanted revenge. She wanted respect. She wanted safety. She wanted the truth. And in the end, she discovered that the greatest victory isn't watching someone lose. It's helping others live without fear. Moral of the story: true courage is not taking revenge. True courage is standing up for what is right, protecting others, and trusting that honesty and justice are stronger than fear. The end.